All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Time for us to take a look at our discussion on the program this moment. The first one, Uproar has been trailing the pension schemes of former governors, especially those who are still holding public offices, which have been described as bogus by activists and other stakeholders in the country who are calling for the halt of the package. Now, this year alone, 18 other governors and their deputies joined the club of executive pensioners, where states spend more on outrageous pension, severance packages, as the harsh economic realities staring citizens in the face as a result of the removal of the fuel subsidies. Now, we'll be talking about this on the program, talking about the multiple pension severance packages and allowances being enjoyed by public officials such as former governors, senators, ministers, and even commissioners. We have in the studio the team leader of Center for Social Justice, Mr. Onyekpere. He is a lawyer with specialization in development law, including fiscal governance, freedom of information, anti-corruption, extractive industries, political finance, gender and exclusion, human rights, and constitutional reforms. Well, you can say a man of many caps. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
On the program. We also have the Society Legislative Advocacy Center. Okay, that's Suleiman Mande, who is from the Society Legislative Advocacy Center. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you.
Well, this issue is almost becoming a sing-song in Nigeria, and it doesn't look like anyone is listening. SERAP, as a civil society organization, for one I know, has even gone ahead to approach the court over this. Now we have about 8 former governors in the
cabinet.
In the President Bola Tinubu's cabinet. We have about 14 of them as senators in the National Assembly who have served as former governors, and yes, they are here now with these packages to them. What do you make of this? Why do we see this defiance? Let me start with you, Mr. Onyekpere. What do you make of this, really?
Well, it is a function of impunity. Underline that word, impunity, because the rules of engagement are stated in the Constitution, okay, for public officers, particularly high-level retired public officers, is very clear. We need to go back to understand why these public officers are provided with pensions in the first place. Okay, as a former president, vice president, governor, deputy governor, it's expected that you have contributed so much to the development of your people, and that what you held is a very high office where you are not expected to even begin to work for foreign companies or to start doing the meaning work. So on the basis of that, the state is supposed to provide you with some level of comfort to maintain a standard of life until the person is no more. Now, that understanding is not that you should be provided a superfluous amount of money that will now make you to live like a king forever. Now, you even mentioned these former governors in the Senate, now ministers. You forgot that the president is a former governor. Mm-hmm. And it may even be interesting to know whether he is still collecting that big money from Lagos State, why he still draws the perks of office of the president.
Well, I think sometime in 2020, Lagos State repealed that law.
You see, there is a difference between what is stated on paper and what happens in actual practice. Even in some states, some legislators are even dreaming of giving such fat allowances or remuneration to their speakers. And so the important thing is that the amount of money that are being paid is exceedingly out of sync with the current reality. And then to now combine it with another remuneration from another office, which is also very humongous. That's why I'm using the word impunity, because even the courts rule against such double payment. Equity liens against double portions. And the expectation was that the president or the attorney general should have taken steps to stop this, but nothing happened. Whether they appeal that decision, I'm not too sure. Even if they appeal, until the Court of Appeal reverses the decision of the lower court, the decision of the lower court is the law.
Okay, so Mr. Mande, we've seen where civil society organizations have called this out, just like you mentioned in the beginning, and then we see these things happen over and over again. And in this present administration, we still see lots of them who will be receiving pensions and still be collecting salary for the position that they hold. So what's the stand of, let's say, your organization now, or the civil society organizations going forward for this kind of actions?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me say that we expect the government to do the right things at all times, to follow the Constitution, to follow the rule of law, to serve the interest of the people, because it is the people that put them there. Democracy is, as defined by Abraham Lincoln, is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we have a situation in Nigeria whereby self-interest overrides democratic norms. Self-interest overrides good governance. Self-interest overrides serving the people. So when we have a situation whereby government officials do things to serve their own interest, not necessarily the interest of the people who put them there. So we have, like Barrister said, issues of impunity, whereby all acts of misconduct are carried out by these officials, but they go unpunished without sanctions. So our role as civil society organization is to call the government out, to speak out in place of the people. The people the government represents don't have the voice. We serve at the voice of the people. So we always speak out. Like you mentioned that Sarah spoke out, right? So our role is to speak out, to call the government attention to this impunity, to the fact that they are not there to serve their own selfish interest. People put them there. They do not put themselves there. So it is the interest of the people they must protect, the welfare of the citizens that they must improve.
That draws my attention. I was having a conversation with someone at some point, and like the civil society organizations have dragged the government to court in many instances. How would we, you know, kind of gauge the kind of results that you've gotten so far? Because I can see Sarah is always calling out the government, CISLAC at some point, you know, and other civil society organization. How far so far?
Well, there are so many achievements so far as a result of our interventions. You know, we, as our name implies, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, we engage the National Assembly, the State Assembly, and to some extent the local assemblies at some point. So the results we get is that, you know, there are bills that are passed that protect the best interest of the people, right? For example, the Not Too Young to Run bill, for example, right? Which provides an avenue for young people. We have seen how there is a significant shift, right, in how the large number of older people who dominated the political sphere of the country, we have seen a significant shift in that as a result of our interventions. So we have so many interventions, so many bills that were passed as a result of our interventions. So this goes to tell you the extent at which civil society organizations have, you know, gone to at least in our own little way contribute to the welfare of the...
All right, Barrister, there are those who made the argument that, you know, sometimes some of these packages is so that politicians at that level, governors and the rest, focus on issues of governance so that they don't embezzle money, so that they don't engage in corrupt practices when they know that after being in office, they have some kind of assurances as to their upkeep and their welfare. How do you respond?
That's the philosophy, that's the jurisprudence behind those beautiful packages, but it cannot be the philosophy supporting outrageous packages, because you must look at whatever package is meant for a retired government official in terms of the relativity to what those who are in service are earning. So you cannot justify having the state to pay, for instance, 2 or 3 SUVs, paying for the education, health of all your children, and at the end of the day giving the retired person money in excess of 200-300 million in a year. So you begin to ask yourself, how do you reconcile this with the income from the same state of people who are on the minimum wage, the teachers, even some of them when they retire, they don't get their gratuity, they don't get their pension for years and years. But as soon as a former governor retires or a legislator is leaving office, within a period of 2-3 months, they get all their emoluments. So even coming back to the question you raised earlier about how successful have these civil society campaigns been, it's just like the question I hear, that every street you go into, there's either a church or a mosque. And every Saturday, every Friday and Sunday, we all hear that good word to say, don't do this, don't do this. And on top of that, people say crime is increasing, sinful behavior is increasing. So you could have imagined what would have happened if nobody is reminding you that A is bad, B is good, don't do C, don't do D. And after it's bombed into your ear on a Friday or on a Sunday, and then you also hear it on radio and television, you still go ahead. If you had not been reminded, maybe nobody will walk the streets. Everybody will be going with a gun.
Yes, but beyond the reminder, we have the courts here in some instances that have given injunctions.
Judgment, yes.
As a matter of fact.
Good.
But they are being flouted. Nobody is...
That's why I used the word at the beginning, that word, impunity. All right? Impunity in the sense that the executive is under obligation under the Constitution to enforce and obey judgments of the court. When they begin to disobey judgments of the court, that's when you have this kind of scenario. For instance, way back about 10 years ago, the Center for Social Justice had a judgment, a court judgment, which said that it was under Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. You know, legislators, they simply see a bulk sum figure, 100 million, 200 million as their money under the budget. NJC, Judicial Council, NDDC, all of them, they just have lump sums. We argue that it is not right in a constitutional democracy for anybody or any institution to spend public money in a way and manner that is not known to the public. And the court said yes. The Attorney General came, defended the case and lost. They said, publish the details of the votes to the National Assembly. Publish the details of all statutory transfers. They behave like they never saw the judgment. They did not appeal. And up to today, they don't obey. The only time they attempted to give a little details was under Saraki's leadership of the Senate, the politics of the time.
On a personal ground.
Yeah. So it wasn't like he was obeying a court order. It was out of his personal goodwill. So now another person who is not disposed to do us that charity, quote and unquote, to let us know how money is being spent. They didn't appeal. That judgment is still lying there.
In the 10th Senate, I know that before the swearing or inauguration of the 10th senators, one of the former governors, Benga Daniel, made a statement that he has written to his state government to stop the payment of his, life pensions and the rest of them, and he's about the only person who did that. Now you have more than about 13 others who are still, including the Senate President, who is a former governor himself, entitled to, salary as much as that of the incumbent governor in the state. The house that we're talking about in a choice location, the 2 cars, the gardeners, cooks, security details, and all that, even medical treatment for him and his family and the rest of these are some of the entitlements. Is there any law that says, no, this cannot be done? Or are we even looking at the direction of making legislations that will prohibit, say, former governors or people who have had one public office or the other and are now in another public office to say, okay, since you are now in this new office, you are not going to be entitled to this other packages from the other office?
When Daniel did what he did out of another same word, charity, that's his own disposition. So it wasn't like he was obliged to do it. But if you look at the 5th schedule of the Constitution, where they were discussing what former high-level public officers should earn and what they shouldn't do, it's clear that they are not entitled, while being on that remuneration, on that pension, to earn another salary on a full time. The best they could do is a little pay that comes if they become a director in a publicly owned company, maybe the sitting allowances, but they are not entitled to go and earn. It's there in the Constitution, okay, in the Code of Conduct for Public Officers. So what they're doing is in violation of the Constitution.
So the argument again that they will put forward is that being an appointee of government or being a member of the Senate is not a permanent employment.
No, it's a full-time job. Legislators are on full-time job. Contradict me if it's not a part-time business. Even when they go on recess, they are still paid or they receive prayer points.
Now, what about if the
ministers are also full-time?
But after their tenure as ministers, what happens?
So you can suspend the money coming from your state, for instance, when you become a senator. When you finish your senatorial journey and go back, they can continue paying you.
So where is the jurisdiction for that now? Because sometimes the argument also about, laws made at the subnational level, state assemblies made the laws, in this regard, and so the National Assembly may not, have the powers to be able to make laws in that regard that may contradict. I mean, you are the lawyer.
The fact that the State House of Assembly made a law entitling me to a pension does not mean that pension must be paid at all times. So what the National Assembly can make a law, I mean, in furtherance of this constitutional provision, and put it in black and white, prohibiting double portions. When we are taught elementary law, they said equity leans against double portions. You've taken one. There are 4 pieces of meat in this room, and we are 4 of us eating. You've taken one. You are aware he has not taken, and I have not taken, and you begin to go for the second. I mean, you don't even need a law to tell you that what you are doing is not fair enough. When we were children, we used to fight over such scenarios. If there are 2 pieces of meat and there are 2 of us, by the time you go for the first one, I will hold the other one, so that for the avoidance of that.
Okay, so Mr. Mande, now let me ask these questions. A lot of civil society organizations have been calling for scrap of all of this, and to strike a balance now, we've seen former state governors who leave below abysmal, things gone down the drain after they leave office. Is there maybe in future calling for maybe a particular kind of pension for them, maybe something that is reasonable for them, or we go for the scrapping totally? What's the stance of the civil society organizations? Scrapping totally, or maybe something that can sustain them after they left office?
Well, let me first say that true leadership is not about power. It's about empowerment. True leadership is not about control. It's about service, right? Giving. And true leadership is also not about your ability to keep benefiting from public coffers, for example. When you serve the people, you get your own remuneration. When you leave office, it is expected that that stops as a political office holder, because that elections brought you there, right? It is election that brought you there. The people put you in that office to serve them, right?
Okay, but is there a problem with the pension after service, or is it about the double remuneration here? Because those who have made the argument will say, well, if you do that, if you take away whatever entitlements or package from the governors, then you are exposing them to be in a very tight position such that they compromise, while they are in office. So is it about the double remuneration, or is it entirely about, them having pension after they leave office?
But we live in Nigeria, and we know what public officials, government officials do in office. They siphon money. They are corrupt people who steal monies and keep for themselves, right? So I don't see any reason for them to keep getting paid even after office. There's no any reason for that, because we are taking away a large chunk of public money to serve that is meant to serve the people for the benefit of these very few individuals. There is no reason. There is no reason for it. There is no justification for that.
Okay, so one of the things that the civil society organization actually complained about was that, we keep paying pensions for former governors and former public holders, and we keep accumulating debt for our country. So I think 3 years ago, the Debt Management Office came out and said that there's a debt management sustainability that could cover for all of that, even if they are paying past governors. Do you align with that?
Well, I think we always have to look at things from the perspective of serving the people, right? We know for a fact, this is a fact, that even when the Debt Management Office speak, they do not speak to protect the interests of the people. They always speak to protect the interests of these few individuals, right? They have monies that are meant to serve the people, but they give these monies to these people, right? Even after serving office. There is no justification, there is no rationale, there is no reason for that. So it doesn't make so much sense for any rational person to hold an office as a governor, and after leaving office to keep collecting huge amount of money, okay, especially considering the economic reality we are in at the moment.
And Barrister wants to chip in on that.
I think we should distinguish about 2 or 3 things. The first we raised was about the collecting twice. You are picking from here, you are picking from here in a society where people have not even eaten for a day. That's double portions. That's one aspect, which every reasonable person should be against. The second aspect is the humongous nature of the pensions or the entitlements. You have 2 or 3 SUVs to be replaced every 2 or 3 years. You have a driver, you have a cook, you have a gardener. They give you 2 houses, one at the state capital, maybe one in Abuja or in Lagos or wherever, fully furnished, pay your electricity, pay your children. So you are living an all expenses paid life. The humongous nature is a second.
It's like an expenses of another governor in the state.
So the humongous nature of such payments also, that's the second scenario, stands condemned. Now the third scenario is assuming the pensions were reasonable and normal, right? Reasonable pensions that could really help you run your family. And that scenario should be premised on you served the people and you didn't serve yourself while you were there. That means you did not steal, you did not inflate contracts, and you came out and you're entitled to something reasonable. I wouldn't be against that scenario if you serve the people, you didn't mismanage or abuse your position, and then you get something reasonable.
But the problem is
the other 2 scenarios I painted are totally unconscionable before man, before the law, and even before God.
Yes, but Barrister, how do you measure reasonable? How do you determine what's reasonable for someone who have been in an office as high as that of a governor? Let's not forget, while he's governor, He has all these services, you know, in place and all that. So how do you determine?
I do not earn as much as that, but I live a good life. I don't drive. I mean, they are being provided with bulletproof SUVs that cost about 200-300 million. You don't need that to survive. You need a car.
So instead of scrapping that a lot of people are calling for, should we go for reasonable now? Should we be looking at reasonable?
You know, the question he raised is, what is reasonable? People are in this economy earning 40, 50,000 as their wage. If a former governor takes away maybe maximum $1.52 million, I would think that's reasonable because of the kind of mischief that's already in the system. All right, I'm being realistic with it now. So, but the other two, we said, you are collecting humongous amount of money 2 times, or the fact that even what you are collecting can pay a whole local government every month. That's a different ballgame. But if they can work conscientiously, not stealing public money, earning those salaries as stipulated by the Constitution, and finish and go home, and the state says, okay, I will give you 1.52 every month to take care of yourself, I wouldn't be against it. But this is the condition. Not like when you have looted the state dry, incurred debts, stolen the money, you go back and we now keep subsidizing your lifestyle. So this is a decent pension is premised on honest, conscientious service.
Should this apply to everyone who has served as former governor, or should there be exceptions for those who maybe did not go back to seek another political office?
This should apply to everybody who has served as a former governor. And once you enter another public office where you are paid, the rule against double portions kicks in.
But we have governors who left office and never went back to ask for pension. Not that the state actually repealed that act, but, you know, because they don't want it.
Yeah. We have governor. We had a former presidential aspirant who said, I don't collect a kobo from
I remember
my state.
he said that on national TV.
He said that, and nobody was able to. So that was not because he didn't feel it, because that's him. And maybe as governor before he left, if the State House Assembly brought that bill, he wouldn't have agreed to sign. Okay, so that's for him, individual, not.
It's more on a personal ground now, more moral, obligation. But Suleiman, what should be the advocacy in this instance? Now that we now have new ministers resuming office, we now have former governors in the Senate. And again, at the same time, we're talking about how to reduce cost of governance. We're talking about how to show up revenue for the country, debt profile being very high. Nigerians are not really having it, having very, very tough time these days, because of the subsidy removal and the rest. What should be the energy that we should be seeing from members of the civil society groups? Is this something that the civil society is going to take and champion, in this 10th assembly?
Yes, this is a cause for us because one of our core mandates is to advocate for an improved welfare of the citizens. Looking at the current economic realities, which we believe that the leaders themselves should look into. We are talking about reducing the cost of governance, for example. But we are also in a situation whereby we see members of the National Assembly proposing 70 billion to improve working condition of themselves. And we also have seen an incident whereby the Senate President mistakenly, intentionally or otherwise, made mention of the so-called prayer that is going to be sent to the accounts of, this is very, very ridiculous. We are going to keep on speaking out because this is one of the things that we believe. We are going to keep speaking out to the government, calling their attention so that they do the right things, okay? To improve the welfare of the citizens, to put the interest of the citizens at their own heart, because it is these people that put them in their offices. They did not bring themselves there. It is people that brought them there, so they must do the biddings of the people. Public interest in order to provide public good. So we'll keep advocating both at the national, state, local level.
So it's there a plan to work with state governors? Because I know that some state governors actually have made attempts to repeal this act, but it was never successful. So are the civil society organizations going to work with these state governors who are willing to repeal this act?
Of course, we have been working with state governors. We have been working with members of the state assemblies. So this will provide an avenue for us to advocate for repealing this act, so that our focus mainly is for these leaders to put the interest of the people first. Okay? People first. That is the cardinal principle of good leadership. Okay? So we'll keep working with members of the State House of Assemblies, because I believe they are more closer to us than the governors. So, and they are more closer to the governors than us. So we keep working hand in hand with them. We keep advocating so that these acts will be repealed, putting the interest of the people first, improving the welfare of the citizens. All right.
Well, Barrister, at the risk of digressing anyway, even though it's a concluding part of this discussion, I would like to get your thoughts on the prayers that were sent to the senators, in their mails and the rest of them. It generated a lot of uproar at the time, and I recall that there were a lot of discussions around that. And someone gave an analogy that, how do you resume to work, to work in a place, and then after a few weeks or a few months, a couple of months, you decide you are going for leave, and that leave should be paid for. What's the stand of the law in that regard?
Now, when you begin to discuss legalism with members of the National Assembly and the way they carry on, you are simply falling into the ditch which they've dug for you. They are the lawmakers. For instance, in the 2023 budget, federal budget, they made a total provision of 227 billion for themselves. And then they came back, the president offered them and they accepted an extra 70 billion. So you are discussing almost 300 billion. The National Judicial Council accepted 35 billion from the president, the appropriation. So in law, those are part of our laws. So that's why I don't want to look at the legalism. So you give somebody powers to appropriate money, he appropriates for himself. So stricto sensu, that's legal. But what they are doing is grossly immoral. Like I did, you said, you were sworn in June. By July or first week of August, after 1.5 to 2 months, you're already proceeding on vacation. My little knowledge of personnel and human resources in the small office I run, you only get 14 days or less than that at the end of the year when you have, or 1 month maximum when you've worked for 12 months. You don't get a leave after working for 2 months or thereabout, and the leave is even paid. And the kind of way the budget of the National Assembly is made is so shady that they have monies put in different places from which they can extract and share among themselves. As we are talking, there is close to $1 billion for constitution amendment. Who is discussing constitution amendment? We just finished one. And you are a new National Assembly. You've started already putting money for constitutional amendment. So what I'm saying in essence is not about legalism. They are the lawmakers. So whatever they put in the law becomes the law. They had no business collecting extra 70 billion because the 227 billion they took is the highest in the history of the National Assembly in terms of appropriation. Now, if you share that 70 billion by around 400 and something of them, each of them is going to get not less than 125 million.
No, but they said that the 70 billion is not going to them as lawmakers, but to the entire.
They can tell that to the Marines. We are not small boys. I mean, we are older than many of them. If you share the 500 billion the president was proposing overall for among the 130-something million Nigerians who NBS said are multidimensionally poor, you get about 3,700 each. 3,700 each. But the legislators, their own package gave them 125-something million each. So that will tell you the story of morality, of legalism. So this thing is beyond legalism. So since they have the powers of appropriation, what they are doing consistently is an abuse of those powers.
So it appears we have to go beyond legalism to address some of the immoral, you may say, conduct that we see in terms of, you know, the use of finances or funds in Nigeria.
Of course, but in the language of politicians, morality is out of the equation. Issues of morality are out of the equation. It's only, they're only after doing what suits them, what serves their interest. Okay. So the best thing I think we can do is, Barrister talked about impunity, right? These people doing all acts of things without being called to account.
All right. Well, we'll have to round up the conversation at this point. Thank you so much for joining. Suleiman Mande, he is from the Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC. And also, we have the man with many caps, I would say, Mr. Onyekpere. He's a lawyer with specialization in development law, including fiscal governance, freedom of information, and many more. We appreciate you joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right, we'll take a short breather now, and then when we return, we'll be taking a look at the highlights of our news and also stories on the front pages of our newspaper.